All right. So thank you everyone for attending this webinar today. Jenny and I are really excited. We have had a lot of fun putting this together and coming up with hopefully some content that will really help to enrich your summer camp environment. We would like to welcome our friends from Shape Up who are attending today to help really integrate physical literacy into their summer camps, and they've been doing a fantastic job with that so far, and we're really happy to have them on the call. And we also have some Learn to Play grant recipients as well as some other colleagues and champions from across the country. So as I already mentioned, my name is Leah Weens, and I'm the Director of Engagement with Sport for Life. And we also have with Annie Peterson with the YMCA of Calgary, who has been doing some amazing work in the physical literacy area around their summer camps and across all of their programming. So really excited to have her here today. I think you're going to get a lot of great information and ideas from her presentation and all of the content we have for you today. So what I'm going to do, just a couple of housekeeping items. So everybody is muted right now. So what we do encourage you to interact through the chat box. So on the right-hand side, well, for me, it's on the right-hand side, you have a control panel, and on there are several different tabs. There's a question tab and a chat tab. So you have webcam, polls, you might have a slightly different order. I would encourage you to use the chat box as opposed to the question box, just so that we can monitor that and kind of have all of the conversations happening in one place. And we do encourage you to send in your questions. I'll be monitoring that throughout the webinar, and so following up at the end, we will have time for questions. And if something comes up during the webinar that we want to address right away, we can do that as well. So without further ado, I will get started. And this webinar is being recorded. It will be sent out to you, as well as all of the resources that we're talking about today as well, and hopefully within the next few days, and maybe sooner, just depending on the technology and how things go on the webinar. So just moving on here. Sometimes, there we go. All right, so we do encourage you to take a look at the Facebook page as well. We'll be posting a lot of the information on there and starting conversations or continuing conversations about your summer camp ideas. Encourage you to tweet as well at sport4life_SPV. And then we have a link to our webinar series. So when you receive this link to the slides, all of these links are live, and you will be able to click on them and access this information. So just a very quick overview. Those of you who attended the webinar delivered by Sarah Galsworthy a few weeks back, there was a great amount of information there on physical literacy. So I just wanted to start today with a really brief overview of that, and you can refer back to the previous webinar as well as all of our content on the physicalliteracy.ca website to get more information. So when we look at this infographic here, this image, I love it because it summarizes physical literacy without being too wordy in a definition. So the competence, confidence, and motivation to be active for life in various environments, right? And so movement skills is what we talk about, what we mean when we talk about competence, jumping, throwing, or running, jumping, and throwing, the ABCs of the movement that set the foundation for physical literacy. So just like learning how to read, we need those foundational pieces. We wanted to have all of our children and youth in our camps be developing those movement skills, because without those skills, they're not able to kind of build upon those. Those are those building blocks. So again, if a child misses out on a skill, they're less likely to participate in activities that require the skill. So in your summer camps, if you notice that a child is maybe a little bit awkward when they run, or when they hop, they tend to fall over all the time, and I think in the past, we've really just kind of thrown skills at kids and had them running around, and we're pretty happy that they're just moving. But if we can train our eye to look at the actual quality of the movement and then create opportunities for kids to develop those skills, then we're going to set them up for success. So when they have those skills, they're much more likely to be confident, right? If I know how to throw, I'm much more likely to be confident to participate in a baseball game, for example. And we all have a role here. So parents have a role, coaches have a role, recreation leaders have a role, right? We can all play our part. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, is how you as a recreation leader or recreation supervisor can really support this physical literacy journey of your campers. So the participation in quality sport and physical activities led by trained and caring adults helps with motivation. And so we're going to give you some examples of that as well, of how can we create a motivating environment. And so the focus of today is really around the competence piece with some confidence and motivation built into that as well. And we know in summer camps, you guys are great at working with the kids, making it fun, building that supportive environment, and maybe the competence or the skill side is an area where you may or may not have as much experience, so we wanted to focus on that, but you really can't do one without the others, so it's all tied together. We know that there's also a gender gap, so be aware of that in your summer camps, that girls generally physical literacy levels in boys are below where we would like them to be for health and for physical activity participation, and then girls are even below that. And so be aware of that and think about creative ways of how can we encourage our girls to participate, and it may be a slightly different approach than with the boys, so just keep an eye out for that. And then finally, we know that it's a positive feedback loop. So when children have the competence, the confidence, and the motivation, they're more likely to be physically active. And if they're more active, their skill is going to increase. So the more they do a skill, the better able they will be to participate and complete those complex tasks. And then that continues to feed into their confidence and motivation. So it's all a great positive cycle. And we're going to give you some tips on how to go about that right now. So one thing I do want to preface this with is something for you to think about, that we often confuse physical literacy with physical activity or even with fundamental movement skills. And I want to reinforce to you that they're two different things. So in my image here, I have the drill sergeant. And if you can easily, as a camp leader, the kids will listen to you. So if you ask them to go run laps, if you ask them to go, jump up and down 20 times, they're more than likely will do that. Are they having fun? Are they learning new skills? Are they more likely to want to do that activity when they leave summer camp? Or are they going, oh, I'm doing this because I have to, and I don't really like it, but I'm going to get in trouble if I stop, so okay, I'll do it. And so they may have got their 60 minutes or their 30 minutes of activity that day, but they really haven't gained any capacities to want to continue to be active once they leave your camp. So when you're developing physical literacy, it's not always active, meaning your child's heart rate isn't always going to be elevated. So that we do need to find ways to incorporate physical activity, but also take the time to allow the kids to learn how to do a skill like throwing, how to learn the rules of the game, all of those kind of things, right? Because that's the foundation to leading to being physically active. And we know that movement skills are important to our lives. So this is a picture of a fitness class that I teach here in Cochrane, Alberta. So I'm just west of Calgary, and these are the fit chicks, and they're walking like ducks, not chicks, I guess, in our main street in downtown Cochrane. And I love these pictures and the smiles on their faces because I think about your own experiences in physical activity and your physical literacy journey, and how does that impact your participation in sport and physical activity today? And can you pass some of those messages and some of those lessons and experiences on, or how can you maybe prevent some of those experiences in your campers if your experiences weren't that positive, so that all of the kids in your camp end up doing an activity like this. They're confident enough to go down a slide, to quack like a duck on the main street of Cochrane, to go and participate in a pickup game of shinny or soccer in their local neighborhood, right? And so down at the bottom, I have, think about an everyday activity that was impacted by an individual's movement skill. So if a child isn't able to throw, that's kind of an easy example, right? Then they may, again, not be wanting to participate in any activities that involve throwing, right? Or they may not even be able to throw, an implement or something to another person if in a life skill, right? Or an activity that was avoided. So if you're not confident and you get asked to go play golf, or you get asked to go, on a hike, and you're just not confident to do that based on your early foundational skills, then that's an impact on your daily life. So continue to pass those messages along and help to create that positive foundation. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to talk about skill development. And remember, physical literacy is more than just skill development. Skill development is that one piece, that competence piece. We know that often summer camp leaders, you come from a variety of backgrounds, and so we want to help to really empower you around this piece. And then Jenny's going to finish up by talking about how to promote this throughout the summer, because we know that you're gung-ho right now. It's the first week of camp. Everybody's all excited and enthusiastic, but by 3 weeks in, everybody's kind of exhausted. There's lots of things going on, and so we want to help to keep that fresh in your mind because it will keep it fun and energizing. So we have 6 different tips for you today around skill development. So one of them is the accuracy first, speed second. So when we're learning a new skill, just like anything, these are kind of common sense, but they really warrant some attention and some reinforcing. So we want to make sure that when children are learning a new skill, or if they're correcting maybe a pattern that's developed that's not as effective, we want to make sure they go slow first, right? So you can think of lots of different phrases like we need to go slow to go fast, right? We want accuracy first, speed second. So how do we do that? And oftentimes what we see happen is we might spend a few minutes teaching a throwing skill or a hopping skill or a dodging, something like that. So we might have a little bit of an activity or a task where the kids will do something for 5 or 10 minutes. And then what we do is we throw that into a game. So we play a tag game and we have the kids doing that skill, like let's say it's hopping. So now all of a sudden the kids are hopping, but they're in a time and space pressure environment. So they're really worried about getting tagged by the other person. They're not really thinking about their hop. The movement pattern hasn't been reinforced in their bodies, and so they're not able to keep up an effective hop. So they're kind of reinforcing some, maybe some not as positive habits. So how can you encourage that accuracy piece? One of the ways we do this is through using agility ladders. This is only one way, and a lot of the examples we talk about here today can be applied to many different activities and games. But when you use an agility ladder, there's some immediate feedback there. If you trip on the ladder, if you step on the rungs of the ladder, you need to go back to the beginning and try it again, right? Go slow, make sure you've got the pattern down, then you can gradually increase the speed. The other thing we do with a ladder is we leave space. So if a child has somebody right up behind them, they're much more likely to just rush through or even step off the ladder and kind of give up if somebody's right behind them. They don't want to slow people down. So a lot of this is really about how do you set up your tasks, how do you set up the activities so that all children have the opportunity to be successful. And so another way we do this is even when we're doing hopping, we have color coding for the cones. So if you hop on your right foot, if you see the green cone, hop on the left foot if you see the red cone or over the red cones. And so make sure you're not landing on the cones. So we use those for feedback. And so I'm going to pass it over to Jenny for a minute because she has some great examples of how the YMCA encourages this sort of accuracy first.
So hi everyone. Thanks, Leah. So yeah, we actually have tried doing some circuit type training, and we're going to share a circuit with you that we've done a little bit later. Leah's going to share it. Trying this out with some of our training with counselors recently that, exactly what Leah said, if the way that you set it up certainly encourages certain types of skill development or encourages participants sometimes to go down the road of maybe more the competitive side, and they're trying to go for speed versus the accuracy first. So I really think seeing some of these things in action when we've been practicing here at the Y, really setting it up so that there's the practice component first, and your or whoever you're going and doing the circuit with, it could be if you're doing a training or actually with participants. Maybe separating 2 lines so that they're not wanting to compete against each other right away off the bat. That was something that we took away. And then really getting them to start off with start with your right foot, you're just going through. And then if you kind of teach them the progression after they've had a few rounds of practice, then they can go into moving into adding more speed to it. But sometimes if you give it to them all at once or you set them up side by side, their brains automatically go to wanting to go faster and compete, and then the accuracy gets lost, even in the more drill type of or more of the circuit side of things, even if it's not in a game. So anyway, it's just something to think about. I'll turn it back to you, Leah.
Jenny. And the other thing is too, like we have a comment there about the appropriate spacing, right? And so if the cones are too far apart and the kids can't hop over them, then, or they can't hop over them without, changing their technique or having a sloppy landing or things like that, then we are aware of that as a leader and we modify, right? So the other thing I talk a lot about when we do this is do the best you can, not the fastest you can. And sometimes that helps, but kids naturally do want to go fast, so we have to be very clever as leaders and have them come up with ways of encouraging that accuracy. And so each of these pieces build upon each other. So the second idea to promote skill development is that repetition. And how do we have enough repetition so that that skill becomes more natural and is developed in an effective way without making it boring, right? We're not going to have kids go and throw a ball 100 times at the same spot on the wall, but let's incorporate it into lots of different games and activities throughout the week wherever we can. So again, the first step often in physical literacy is we say, oh, we need to do lots of different skills. Okay, so let's just incorporate these skills throughout the day. And so again, we play a tag game, we're hopping, we're jumping, we're skipping, we're galloping, we're hopping, or I keep using hopping today. There are many other skills. There's backwards walking, there's sideways crossovers from station to station. We can integrate those. But are we getting enough repetition in order to help develop those skills? Again, intention, right? So planning with intention and with purpose. So if you have a skill, let's say we noticed that a lot of the kids in the camp really have a hard time traveling sideways. Okay, well, let's maybe make that a skill or a focus of the day or a focus of this week. So whenever we have an opportunity, let's build in some lateral movement, some side steps, some crossovers, things like that. So there's lots of different ways that we're able to do that. And again, repetition is important, but it doesn't have to be boring. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this because this has been a really effective way of incorporating movement skill development in a fun and interesting environment. So the superhero training, which also is sometimes called circus training, and if any of you have ever attended a session with Dr. Dean Creelars, this is a lot of the foundation of his work around physical literacy and how he likes to promote the skill development piece. And so Jenny's going to talk in a little while about the superhero training that we've been doing in Calgary for the last couple of years. And in our superhero training, we call this the superhero circuit. And so superheroes need to do these activities in order to make sure that they are at the top of their game, right? They can perform their duties as to their best of their abilities. And so these are the 6 different stations that we put together. So it's jumping tall buildings. So just as an FYI, jumping is 2 feet to 2 feet, and hopping is 1 foot to 1 foot. Okay, so we want to be clear and consistent in our language as well. So jumping, the Thor throw. So we had a beanbag toss activity. Planet hopping. So again, we use the cones in that one. Hopping on your right foot, hopping on your left foot, hopping from 1 foot to the other, which we could also call a leap. The Wonder Woman or Wonder Man walks was a balancing activity where they're balancing on a line, balancing on a bench, something that's safe, but that allows them to feel that adaptation in a narrow space. We have juggling, which is a brilliant activity. They get to make up their own juggling routine and just experiment and play. So free play is a really important part of this as well. And then the agility training, which was the agility ladders. And so we've set up these stations. And so Tyler's going to just bring up Tyler is our support person here, our right-hand man at the Sport for Life office, and he's going to bring up the superhero circuit training description. And so basically, you're going to get this in the handouts, but what we do is we set up the 6 stations, and hopefully we've gone through a little overview of each of those skills. So we have hopping on 1 foot, hopping and jumping, a little lesson on that. And then I'm not sure if I'm able to scroll on this, Tyler. Can you just scroll down a little bit? Really easy. You don't need much equipment at all. And so you can use cones that are kind of squishy, the low cones that compress so that kids don't trip on them, a foam balance beam, chalk, a rope, tape, kind of anything you have around that makes a natural line. Bean bags in a plastic tub, and pylons. Another way, I'll tell you about another way we can do the beanbag activity in a minute. You might want to whistle to help with the changing of stations and then agility ladders. So you just set up the 6 different stations, and like I said, you're going to get this, so I won't go into too much detail on each of the stations, but you can, once you've set it up, then you start to get all sorts of ideas. The kids come up with ideas and you can modify it. But the main focus here is that you have the kids split into their 6 stations. They stay there until you see them kind of fading. That's good, Tyler. You can just leave it there. Until you see them kind of maybe losing interest or they've done enough repetitions, and then you can blow the whistle. You can have a command that you use to help them rotate to the next station. And so they're kind of able to do it at their own pace. It's not in a competitive environment. There's lots of space between the participants, so they're able to really have lots of chance to practice the skills. One of the other things, though, in the throwing one was the first time that I was doing this, they were standing behind a line and just tossing the beanbag into a bucket. And then they would go to the back of the line, toss the beanbag, go to the back of the line. And so that was fine, but what I learned from, and I can't remember who to give credit to, but we created a big tic-tac-toe board with tape. And so what I had them do then was, stand about 20 feet back or so, run up to a line that was about 10 feet from the tic-tac-toe box, stop, toss the beanbag into one of the tic-tac-toe squares, and then go to the back of the line. So then they were creating a little bit of a game out of that, and they were getting a bit of activity as well. So that's another variation of sort of just a typical beanbag toss. And so, like I said, this is kind of an overview. The juggling one, again, just get them to experiment. They can do on their own. One ball, 1 beanbag, 2 beanbags, 3. They can try to pass back and forth with a partner, and they can do that for hours. They love the juggling, and it's so great for hand-eye coordination, for building confidence, for socialization, all of those kind of things. And then the agility ladders as well. And so if you don't have enough volunteers at each station, what you can do is, spend a little more time in the beginning of the week, maybe going through each of those stations, put some signs up, put some pictures at each station, so then the kids know what to do at each station. So yeah, you can just scroll right down to the bottom. And so on this handout, you're going to get this. You'll be able to play around with it. And then what I'd love for you to do is to post on the Facebook page and tell us how it went. What did you learn from it? Did the kids like it? What kind of adaptations did you make to it? Because like I said, we've had really great success with this one, and it's a great way for that to reinforce all of the components that we're talking about here today. So Tyler, maybe I'll get you to just zip back to the slideshow.
Leah, can I just add one thing about one of our experiences as well? We're shifting gears. Just with the jumping one, we tried this a couple of weeks ago. We just a couple of weeks ago actually in our day camp training, and one of the things that I think really that I learned just watching and doing it on a practical side was just making sure you have the progressions available. So even with we did it as a training with our counselors, and just remembering, I guess, that even as adults and as you grow up, not everybody has those skills or is developed in those skills, and so I think having progressions available for even in a training is really important. So in a jumping station, you don't want to have just big, huge jumps for people to do or for the kids to do. You probably want to make a variety of different options so that everybody feels like they can find a place in that jumping drill that they're comfortable with, because it can be very intimidating if you set up a circuit with big hurdles and they're not confident in their jump yet. And so it's just one thing that I think would be really important if you are going to try this, is to make sure you have, like, we had, I think, 3 different progressions as we did the superhero training, where literally the first progression was you're just jumping over a little pylon, and that is it. It's a super tiny little jump. Then I think we moved it up to jumping over a small hurdle. And then eventually I think our last progression was jumping over a big milk crate or a larger hurdle. So just, again, something to think about in your setup and your design.
Exactly. Great. Thank you. So just waiting for the slides to come back up again, but that's exactly one of the next pieces that we're going to talk about, is how do we build in those progressions. Perfect. I'm just waiting for my mouse to take over here. There we go. All right, so the Goldilocks principle. So is the skill too boring or too is it too boring, or is it too difficult, or is it just right? And so our challenge as camp leaders and camp counselors is to provide that appropriate level of challenge for each child. And that can be a big challenge in a diverse group of kids, right? So some of the ideas that I've seen used are a 2 up, 2 down idea. So for each activity that you're doing, provide 2 options to make it more challenging and 2 options to make it maybe a little bit less challenging, a little bit more inviting for kids who aren't as confident or who don't have the skill or who have, maybe it's any kind of fear, any kind of other issues that they might have. Another thing I've seen is to use the rec and competitive depending on your group. So you could say this is going to be the recreational group and this is going to be the competitive group. You choose which group you want to be in. And so if they're feeling kind of feisty and they want to really go for it, they'll go in the competitive group. If they're feeling a little subdued, a little nervous, they might want to go in the recreational group. I'm not sure I love that terminology, but it kind of gets the point across, right? So you can kind of experiment with what phrases you might want to use. Maybe it's lions and tigers, right? It doesn't have to be any kind of then there's no association with a level. It could just be apples and oranges. It could be flames and Oilers, right? That's what kind of some of the things. Sometimes I call them boys and girls, and then the girls are in the boys group. I'm like, I don't want to be in that group, right? So there's lots of creative ways, and camp counselors and leaders are the experts in creativity and coming up with different ways of challenging the kids. So I don't think I need to spend too much time on that one. The other thing that you see coming up over and over again is equipment, right? The size of the equipment, the spacing of the equipment, and we have a little video we're going to show you in a little while that reinforces this. But again, changing the size of the equipment, adding stations. So the example we gave with the circuit training and circus training is exactly this, right? Because Jenny talked about progressions, we talked about giving time and space. There's no competitive aspect necessarily. You can create that if you want to in the circus training. So it provides a really great way to illustrate all of these pieces.
Mm-hmm. That's actually, sorry, Leah, if you don't mind, I'll just add one more comment. That's actually one of the things I really liked about the circuit training is that it's basically like more of a self-discovery opportunity. Like when you have the chance to just play around with your skills and you just focus on that versus being part of a game or some sort of sport or whatever where that's where the chance is, but you really don't get that chance to repeat those motions. And I think it's really a self-discovery opportunity, and it's not meant to be a competitive opportunity necessarily in the circuit itself. So I think it provides a really nice opportunity for all levels and abilities to feel comfortable.
Exactly. And I actually was just using it at a kind of a activity day at a school, and the kids had just come from playing Omnikin ball, and then they got to play I forget what the other one was. It was like bubble baseball or something. So they were having these great rambunctious times, right? And I felt like, oh, this is going to be not the most exciting station. But what I said to them was, this is the station that's going to help you to have more fun at all those other activities. This is the one that's going to give you all the skills in order to do those games, to be faster, to jump higher, right, to be able to dodge around other participants. So I try to frame it in that way. And you know what, they actually do have a lot of fun with it, even though it's not the full-on kind of game scenario, but it really keeps their interest, it keeps their attention, and as long as you're not making them stay at a station too long and you're changing it up, then they love it, and you can do it for a pretty extended period of time. So the fourth one here is in the different environments. So can we incorporate the different environments, air, water, outdoors, so land-based activities in and on the water, in the air. Air would be like a jumping activity, right? So if you jumping either just off the ground or jumping off of a bench or trampolining type activities or anything where you're suspended and you manipulating your body in air. So some of the ideas we talked about in a camp environment, you often get that, right? Because you guys have days to go to the pool, you have days maybe where you go hiking, you're looking at working on different surfaces, you might get to go into the ice arena. So this is an opportunity for kids who may never have that chance during the year if they don't participate in other sports or their parents maybe aren't as engaged or able to take them. This is a great opportunity to expose the kids to different environments. So some of the things you can do is to try the same activities you love to do on the land, do it in a different environment. Do a game you did in the gym, do it on the ice, do it in an uneven surface out on the field. Compare what that feels like. So it's a great opportunity. The other thing you can do is if you don't have the opportunity to go in those other environments, you can imitate them, right? Kids love to use their imagination. So one of the best ones that I've learned from the Be Fit for Life network here in Alberta is they just take scrap paper, right? Recycled paper. Give each child 2 pieces of paper. You're on a gym floor, and there's your skates, right? They slide around the floor. They can spin around. They can imitate that feeling of being on the ice. And then at the end of it, you can put music on. They can make up their own routines. So you can creativity is limitless here. And then at the end, they crumple up the piece of paper. They can play a game with it. Throw the paper into a bucket, right? Or play any sort of game as well that allows them to do that. That garbage can, what's it called? Junkyard cleanup kind of activity, right? So in the different environments, again, just keep an eye to that. Are we able to replicate them? Are we able to incorporate the different environments in our camps? Jenny, did you want to add anything there?
I think, thank you. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I'd say like the paper, the gliders have been a really popular activity at the Y, like now with the younger kids especially. And you can just turn music on and you twirl and yeah, you pretend you're skating around, and it's just a fantastic activity for, I think, the young kids as well as the older kids. You can start to, mimic hockey and speed skating and stuff like that too. So it becomes a really fun activity to become very creative with. So I just add, one thing about just music is another way to, instead of using whistles, if you have access to music, if you're inside, music is an amazing way to focus children on a particular station. So we actually use music in some of our circuit training stations. So that was the cue to move kids to the next station versus a whistle. And so just another tip to add on.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. And then, so the fifth progression is around, or sort of the fifth concept around skill development is progressions. And really, I couldn't come up with like a clever little title for this one, but in the end, I was thinking about it this morning. I thought, you know what, you don't have to be a movement expert, right? You don't have to have a degree in kinesiology to teach skill to kids. We all have seen competent runners, competent jumpers, competent throwers. We have the Olympics coming up. We have all of those images of those great athletes in our minds of what we want, what we aspire to, or maybe we don't aspire to that, but we know what the model is of the best, whatever it is, right? Thrower, jumper, runner, those kind of things. So we don't have to be experts. We just want to train our eye to observe. And then if you go online, you can find all sorts of any progressions that you like in order to teach a skill or support a skill. So I just put one here, and this is the Physical Health Education Canada Fundamental Movement Skills resources, and I put the link there as well. But when I did a Google search, there's this great resource from Sask Sport as well on skill development that's probably even more user-friendly. You just kind of download it, whereas the PHE ones, you do need to order those books online through their online store. But this page with the hopping is an example of one of the progressions, right? So what are the characteristics of it? What does the motion look like? How do you land it? And then some cue words. And then on the next page, they actually give you some games and activities that you can do that reinforce hopping. So that whole repetition piece, the accuracy first, all of those kind of things, right? So again, you don't need to be an expert, and you don't need to spend tons of time researching, just like, oh, you know what, again, I've noticed my kids are not really that good at the 2-foot piece. So when they hop, they're actually okay, but when they jump, they seem to not be able to coordinate their movements. So, looking online for some different ideas, some different keywords, or talking to your other camp leaders who may have more of a background in movement skills, and also come up with your own creative ways. Oftentimes when you're not immersed in something, you see it from a different lens. And so you might come up with some really clever cues that, like keep your legs stuck together, or, can't even think of anything like, run like lightning or whatever it might be, right? So you can come up with some different cue words that really help to read concepts. And then the final one is that selection piece. So fostering the ability to problem solve. So if we're constantly cueing our kids and telling them what to do, we're taking away the opportunity for their brains and their bodies to learn the movement and to really make it part of themselves, right? And to make it really natural for them. So if there's always an external focus, they don't internalize the movement. And this is so tempting. And when you look at a ladder drill and their little complicated movement happening, we want to go in and help them and move their feet for them sometimes and like take them through step by step. And we want to just sit back, often sit back and just let the learning happen. Create a challenge, create the task that's manageable for them, that's a realistic, and then have them watch them, struggle with it a bit. We want them to be able to overcome challenges, to feel the sense of accomplishment when they figure something out for themselves, right? So again, the task can be the teacher. So this is a great example, is if we have a child stand, let's say they stand 1 foot away from a wall and we ask them to throw a ball. You know what, they're not going to do a very good throw, right? They might have their elbow close to them. They might just toss it really lightly because the ball is going to come back and hit them in the head, probably. So if we get them to stand, 10 feet back or 15 feet back and throw the ball, they're naturally going to start to incorporate a step. They're naturally going to start to lift their arm higher, rotate their body, and get their full body movement in there, right? So often we don't need to break it down in words. We just need to understand what we're looking for and then use that to create the tasks to help with that. And it's much more fun. It's a much more organic way of learning and teaching. The other piece around it is the equipment again. See equipment coming up on every slide, just about. And so, if we're trying to teach a skill of a ball manipulation, whether it's bumping, whether it's throwing and catching, volleying, those kind of things, using a beach ball or using a balloon is obviously more user-friendly than throwing a volleyball in at the very start, right? And you're always going to have some kids who can manage and manipulate that maybe more challenging object, but everybody has more fun and more repetition and more success if we can adapt the equipment to the skill level. Do you want to add anything here, Jenny?
I'd say the balloons or the beach volleyball, sometimes those aren't pieces of equipment that are automatically available. That's something that we've had to kind of do some assessment on, is just making sure we have that equipment available to our camp staff so that they can use it. So I think, just something to think about is just having those supplies ready, because, I think balloons automatically, naturally encourage some different movement forms, and you can have a lot of fun, again, with balloons, and it just naturally happens, so.
Exactly. One thing there is, I think it's a fairly low incidence, but there are kids who are allergic to latex, so just be aware of that, and also the choking hazard for younger kids. But I think we need to manage our risk in most cases. If your kids are old enough to know not to put pieces of balloon in their mouth, then I think you should be. It is a great activity, and as soon as you blow up a balloon, it just feels like a party already, right? So it just creates this really fun, energized environment. Sometimes kids don't need to be more energized, but it is a good way to help them develop those skills. All right. So this is a summary of what I just covered. I have a couple in it that I didn't include. So number 4, which is comprehension, is just always making sure the kids understand what you're asking them. Do they know the different language words that you're using? So do they know that a hop, when you say hop, you mean 1 foot? When you say jump, you mean 2 feet. When you say karaoke, you mean a grapevine or a crossover. So it's really a crucial piece of physical literacy, is understanding the language and understanding the words. Another piece around comprehension could be, do you know where to do this activity in your community when you go home? If you had fun playing this game or this sport, do you know where to find that? And maybe you can help provide some ideas around that as well. The other one is the diversity. And this one, only don't think we don't think that this is important. This is absolutely crucial. I feel like if you were able to incorporate all of the concepts we talked about today, you would be able to have a very diverse, a very inclusive program. So if you have kids with different abilities in your programs, these skill development components absolutely apply and will help you to really do that. So I think down the road we will have to have a another webinar around inclusion in summer camps, and in our superhero training that we did in Calgary, which Jenny's going to talk about in just a minute, there was a whole stream this year added around the inclusion piece. So like I said, that's a really important component of that, and we want to make sure every child is able to experience and develop their own physical literacy in their own ways, with their own kind of feeling their own sense of control over that. So what I have on the right here is the movement preparation guide that can be found at the physicalliteracy.ca website. And I'm putting this up here because it's actually another great tool for you to use. And again, you could take the kids through these as sort of a traditional kind of warm-up or a traditional kind of activity, depending on the age and the interest and the skill of your kids. Or you could just take these skills and incorporate them throughout the day in different games and activities. So online, there's a whole user guide with this, with pictures and descriptions of each of the skills and activities. So you can see there's some ladder drills in there. So if you're not sure what to do in your circuit training with ladders, you can do that. There's some weaving drills, and there's even some core activities. So you can get them working on their core, which is so important to be able to be a strong and stable mover. So do take a look at that as well as another tool. So what we're going to do now is show you a video that kind of summarizes a lot of the concepts we've just been talking about. Go ahead, Tyler. You might want to just adjust your volume a little bit. Tyler's going to turn his up so you can adjust yours manually on your computer.
Change is coming to tennis. The kids are leading the way. It's called 10 and under tennis, and it's a fun way for your kids to really learn the game. With courts and equipment modified to fit them, kids will develop faster and better and enjoy themselves along the way. So get your kids involved now. With 10 and under tennis, every child can learn to love the game.
So we like that video because it really illustrates, when you see that child standing in the huge net and they look tiny in there, how on earth are they ever going to save the ball, right? If they stood there for an hour in goal and 20 balls went by them, they're not going to feel a whole lot of confidence, right? And they're probably not going to want to go back and do that activity again anytime soon. And so I think that, that video just really illustrates, again, how important it is to make sure that the equipment, the activities that we're doing are really in line with the child's development, the child's sort of where they're at, physically and mentally, emotionally around the physical literacy piece. So we want to make sure that we design the activities to build confidence. So we've talked about skill. I have one slide here on competence and motivation, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jenny to share all of her great ideas to support all of this. So around the confidence piece, we want to make sure that we're positive and we're focusing on accomplishment. So focus on what they can do, what they are doing, not what they can't do. And I think that's a really, it's becoming more and more of a recommended practice, is to build on strengths as opposed to correcting weakness. Oh, you did that all wrong, let's try it again, let's break it down, instead of, what, your step was really good when you took that throw, let's just make sure you follow through to where the target is, right? So being very positive and acknowledging those individual successes. So if you have a child who's very athletic, they may pick all of this stuff up really naturally. How do we encourage them to continue to push themselves and challenge themselves? And meanwhile, we have another child who their success is that they actually participated in an activity. And so again, those are some areas where I've seen camp leaders be very brilliant at being able to address those individual needs. And just that is a really important part of physical literacy, actually, is to keep that individual focus and build that confidence. The responsibility piece as well. So if kids are more skilled, maybe they can help teach the other kids. Maybe they can share a time when they had to overcome a challenge and how did they overcome that in sport or in activity, and then leadership opportunities, and then create lots of smiles, of course, right? So if the kids are smiling and having fun, the juggling activity is a brilliant one for that, then you know that you're on the right track. And social interaction cannot be underestimated. Kids have way more fun when they're interacting with other kids and building that social connection. So this is the same information. And so with that, I'm going to hand it on over to Jenny.
All right, thanks, Leah. So I'm going to hop right to the next slide right away. I think I have control over the slides now, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to click again, see if that works. There we go. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to go through a few of the things that we've been working on at the Y. This summer is our second summer of implementing physical literacy as an approach to our work in camps. And so we've had some learnings along the way that I would want to share along with some of the tools and things that we've developed so that it might help you out with your camps as well. So the first slide I have is kind of our statement that we've created at the Y in Calgary to kind of explain why we've adopted this approach and what it really means. And I think I just put this up here because I think it's important to speak to the underlying reasons and somehow connect it to some of the wording or vision statements that might be in your organization at times. And so this statement up here kind of is how we've done that at the Y. And the words on this statement, belong, grow, thrive, and lead, is why speak. It's why language that we use in Calgary to help describe our impact. So I've tried to connect the term around the components of physical literacy to that so that people can understand or staff can understand why we're doing this. So just one comment around that. I'm going to move through some of these a little bit quick. I think we want to make sure we have some time for questions at the end. So the next slide I have on here is a slide that I think I gave when giving an overview of our work at physical literacy to some of our management teams a few months ago. And so some of the times the question I get is around physical literacy when we started to move to adopt this approach is that, are we already doing physical literacy? Don't we already do programs that encourage physical literacy? And yes, that's absolutely true. But the thing that's different in my mind is how intentional we're being around physical literacy development. And so I created this slide to kind of highlight this to our management team. So on the left, you have some pictures here. I took some of our camps last year in spring, I believe, where the kids were kind of just doing whatever they wanted. You can see they're playing basketballs with some of the bigger nets, just like the tennis video. And I'm like, that's exactly probably what we're trying to move away from into activities that are way more engaging. So you can see there's a big difference with the pictures on the left to the pictures on the right, where kids are a lot more engaged and they're all participating, they're all moving around. The leaders are a part of that. And so I guess at the end of the day, it's about moving from the play as you go or just do it as you always did type of programming to that more intentional programming that really thinks about what kind of equipment you have, develops the program plan to make sure it's the right level of challenge so that all participants are engaged and walk away feeling like a rock star. So that's just something to think about when you're trying to describe it, because sometimes I found that was a question I was getting. All right, so I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking a little bit more about some of the operational aspects or the practical approach that we've used to bring physical literacy to life in our camps. And so I've grouped the strategies or key components of this on the screen into those 5 categories there. And I'm going to go through each one in more detail. But one thing I just want to mention briefly is that when you're trying to make a fairly large-scale change in behavior, so in this case, we're trying to change how we approach some of our camp programming and whatnot to really be very intentional around the physical literacy approach. It really requires a multi-layered and multi-pronged approach, multiple strategies. And so you can't just do one thing and hope it works. I would also say it takes time. So this is our second year of implementing sort of this physical literacy approach, I call it. And so in our first year, we started off with more focusing on internal awareness around physical literacy. So we did some training and did some evaluation work, but really found it wasn't enough. So we expanded on our strategies this summer. So the first thing I'm going to just tell you a little bit more about is the superhero physical literacy training. Oh, get the slide to go. Try it again. Oh, here we go. All right. So Leah mentioned it earlier, but the superhero training is a training that we've been doing in Calgary through the Play Calgary network in Calgary. We're very lucky to be able to have access to these Play networks across Calgary and across Alberta. I know they're also available across Alberta. And so in Calgary, the Play Network stands for Physical Literacy in You. It's a group of like-minded organizations all working to implement physical literacy into their work. So it includes school groups and rec centers and sports groups and Alberta Health Services, et cetera, all sit on this group. There was a smaller subgroup made up of the rec centers in Calgary that came together last year to talk about what kind of physical literacy training was needed or ideal for summer staff. And so we sat on that group as a Y and worked together with several of the other rec centers. And we learned that many of the other centers are doing various different training. Some are using the NCCP FMS training. Some of us are just doing High Five or Healthy Child Development training. But we talked about the need to create a fairly practical level of training for summer staff and something that would resonate in how day camps run. So really making sure they have access to good, fun games that incorporate physical literacy. So we also talked about the need to develop a train-the-trainer approach and basically came up with this concept of superhero training, which is a facilitator training intended for day camp supervisors. So the day camp supervisors would come to this training and then they would go back to their organizations and train the rest of their staff. And so we had, I think, 20 of our staff attend this, or sorry, 19 of our staff attended this past June, and I think it was June 10th. And then a week later, we did a training for all of our 200 plus camp counselors to be trained on physical literacy and how to integrate it into their camp programming. So yeah, anyways, at the end of the day, having this collaboration to tap into has made definitely my job a lot easier to do. And I think it really helped get our staff to really understand the concepts behind it as well. It was a very practical training, very movement-oriented. So they had a lot of fun. It was almost like a day in the life of camp. So anyway, some of the pictures up on the screen. We also created a fantastic facilitator guide that included the circuit training. So everybody walked away with the same approach to make it consistent so that every counselor essentially that's participated in this would go back and have the same concepts around what they're doing with their training. Okay. So the other thing that we learned from last summer was training probably just wasn't quite enough. What we really needed was probably some opportunity for ongoing coaching and feedback to be given to the counselors so that they could operationalize it as best they could. So using those teachable moments to give coaching and feedback is really key. And so this year, we're very lucky that we actually had some funding through Prairie Sky Royalty, petroleum and natural gas company in Calgary. And so they've given us some funds, and so through that, we've been able to hire a coordinator to help with implementing physical literacy this summer. And so we decided that this staff, his name is Sean, he is actually trained to be a phys ed specialist, and so his role is essentially conducting training. He's also currently at the moment is rotating around day camp sites now across Calgary. And he's also going to be helping with giving some more of that on the spot coaching and feedback when he's out at our camp. So he's going to role model activities as well as kind of watch and give feedback and coaching on the spot. He's also going to help support the implementation of using, we call it a physical literacy behavior grid at the Y, which is kind of a tool that we're going to use coaching, and every one of our counselors will get some one-on-one feedback through the use of this tool.
Sorry to interrupt you a sec, Jenny. Do you want to just, we're having a little bit of an echo. I'm not sure if others are hearing that. I want to make sure everybody hears this good stuff. So just maybe, I'm not sure if it's your mic or if it's something else, but let's...
Yeah, sorry, I can hear it too. I just changed it, or I'll just put it on speaker. I was on the telephone, so let's try this. Is this better?
Yep, I think so.
Okay, all right, I'll keep going.
Cool, thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, so we're going to be using this behavior grid to give coaching and feedback to every one of our 180 or so, 200 or so camp counselors this summer. So it gives them that opportunity to really get that specific feedback one-on-one. And that was actually something that came back from the evaluations that we did last summer, that some of the counselors just didn't feel like they got the training, they thought it was great, but they didn't quite still know how to implement physical literacy. So, so next slide. Another key thing that we've done this summer, we did some of this last year. We had some curriculum and program planning resources available, but we purchased sets of move and play cards for every one of our camp groups. So counselors have access to resources that are focused on physical literacy development. So I think that's a really key thing too. Training is one thing and getting coaching, but they need to have access to resources as well. So these move and play cards are actually offered through the BFIT for Life Center, which I should mention is chairs the group in Calgary, the Play Calgary group. So and they're a fantastic resource for us. And so anyone, if you are interested in purchasing these, I know that they are available. I think they're $40 a set, and they're fantastic. And they have games and activities with a bunch of modifications on it for ages from all the way from, I think, 3 or 4 years of age, the younger active start, all the way up to the learn to train stage. So fantastic resource. We've also implemented a minimum of 1 hour a day of physical literacy activities for every child in our camps to create that expectation so it's very clear for our counselors so they know what's expected of them. Again, Prairie Sky has been helping us with the funding to purchase some of these cards and resources, so we're very lucky with that as well. Okay, next slide. There we go. The other part of what we've done a lot more this year, so last year we did a lot more internal awareness raising. This year we've broadened our strategy to move it more external, and so we've done a lot more work around the marketing and communication side. And I think at the end of the day, it creates that expectation for parents to expect this out of our programs now. So we have created pressure to fulfill that gap and make sure that our counselors are delivering on this expectation that parents now have of us. So again, I'm very lucky in Calgary that I have access to an amazing marketing communications team. Krista is the manager who's been helping with this in Calgary. And we've had, they've been creating some amazing materials. And so I've got some examples of this up on the screen. I would say it certainly started with our day camp guide, where we promoted physical literacy as a part of what our day camps would be supporting their child with and whatnot. So some of the parents would be reading this already when they're first signing up for day camps back in February. So our actual marketing strategy for beyond the program guide has started with, we've changed our newsletters and whatnot around in Calgary. So all of our newsletter and parent communication now has physical literacy messaging embedded into it. So you can see some of these materials along the side here. Some of the things that we give out, we send out an email ahead of time that tells them about the schedule, what the skills they're going to develop. We also give handouts on the first day of camp on the 8 ways to tell if a child is physically literate to the parents. We also send all the kids home with a fortune teller. And on the last day of camp, they get a form that directs them to give feedback, as well as more links to activeforlife.com. And I just want to acknowledge Active for Life and Lynn for all of their help and support with this. They've been an amazing support in getting this going, and they've got amazing materials, so definitely go look at their website if you can. Slide. The last part of our strategy, I would say, that I think is important because it really helps develop kind of the plan for where you want to take things, is the evaluation and measurement side. So this really helped us last year. We did a staff survey last year with all of our camp counselors to ask them how about their capacity and ability to implement physical literacy, and that's where we learned they needed more of that hands-on support throughout the summer, and that helped drive our strategy this year. So we're doing the same thing again this year, where we're going to have a summer camp staff survey, as well as we're now implementing questions into our YMCA parent survey. So now we're going to start to ask the parents about how the program that your child was a part of, how it developed their physical literacy abilities, skills, etc. So I have some of the questions up on the screen so you can actually take a look and see it. The other thing that I'll just mention briefly is we've also developed a program development tool that was developed by our child subject matter expert team in Calgary together, and we're going to be using this tool to help develop more help branches develop more local level strategies for how they implement physical literacy. So it's almost like a checklist you can use to go through your programs and think about some of the stuff you might want to do to embed that physical literacy approach. So I've got that checklist up on the screen there, and yeah, anyone that's interested in using some of these tools, just feel free to give me an email and I can send them along if you like. I think we're almost at 9:30, so I think I'm pretty close. Let's move to the next slide. Yeah, so I just want to say thanks for having me on the call. And yeah, if you have any questions or want any copies of some of our resources, don't hesitate to contact me. I'd be happy to help you out.
Fantastic, Jenny. I feel very fortunate that you were able to take the time today to share all of the great work that you're doing. As Jenny said, in Calgary, we've been kind of whittling away at this for a few years, and to start to see some of the work that's being and some of the impact that places like the YMCA are having on their summer camps and ultimately on their kids has been really exciting to see. I think I just want to commend her on the great work and on kind of staying the course on this. And the other thing is, for those of you who are kind of new to this, just to take that message away that you don't have to do it all at once. It is a journey. Physical literacy is a journey. Is it for an individual, also for an organization, and also for a program. So every year, every day, every week, you sort of integrate a little bit more. And there's so much great information and so many great people doing this work now that there's no shortage of inspiration out there, that's for sure. So what I had also put in the chat box was just, and some of you are using the question box, which is great, and some are using the chat. But if you can take a moment just to share one or two sort of key takeaways, some points that maybe stood out for you today, that's really helpful for us to know kind of what is the information that people are looking for that's really resonating with you. So if you do have a final comment, please, as we wind down the webinar, please do type that into the chat box. And unfortunately, we don't have a ton more time for questions. We want to respect your time, but Jenny and I are both available to be emailed, as you can see on the slide there. Both of our email addresses are there. And also want to remind you that we will be sharing all of the resources that Jenny talked about. Those last two were a little bit hard to see on the slide, so we will be sending you the actual documents so you can take a closer look at those, as well as all of the links in the slides will be sent out to you for following up. So with that said, we'll stay on the line for a couple more minutes just to watch if any more chats or any more questions come in. But I want to thank you all and have a wonderful day and have a fantastic summer camp. Thank you very much. Oh. So Tyler, I'm having a hard time seeing the questions. Can you tell me what Spider's question is? We can answer that on here. Oh.
Sure. So Spider has asked, how long is the Play Calgary superhero training for physical literacy facilitators?
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, sorry, some of these weren't showing up. They just popped up now. So the summer camp superhero training was a full day of training, and then and it was meant to train the summer camp facilitators to go and deliver a shorter session to their staff, so like a 2 to 3 hour session. So there was facilitation built in with the actual experience of attending the activities, and then the facilitator guide was meant to be that guide so that the leader could go back and train their staff using that approach. So just as an aside, as Jenny and I were planning this webinar, we pitched the idea to the International Physical Literacy Committee that we should run a superhero training as part of the IPLC next year. So I'm not sure if that's going to fly, but it seems like it was well received. So we're hoping that maybe we can do something like that and then have people across the country trained to do superhero training. And if you want more information about that, and if you want to know how to run one of those in your community, definitely, Jenny and I can connect you as well with Ashley at the Be Fit for Life Center, and we can all help support you on that. All right, great stuff, everyone.
One more question here, Leah, from Spider as well. When does it run, and can we send staff down for training?
Yeah, so we just ran the session beginning of June, so it'll run again next year, just in summer camp training season. So it will. So yes, we can definitely include you on our email list. You can send some staff down and watch for it kind of first week of June next year. Awesome. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.